Hello friends! The Titanic was a historical ship. This ship was delivered in 1912, and during its first, or maiden voyage, it collided with an iceberg and sank in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, it sleeps at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The ocean is finishing what the iceberg started, slowly disintegrating the ship. There will come a time when there's nothing left of the ship at all. Today, we're talking about the Titanic. So, let's start. When two or more ships are made the same way, they're known as sister ships. The Titanic had two sister ships. The first one was called the Olympic, that was delivered prior to the Titanic, and the largest ship in the world during that time happened to be the Titanic, because the Titanic was a few meters larger than the Olympic. But before that, the Olympic was considered the largest. The ship that was to be delivered after the Titanic was initially named Gigantic, then it was changed to Britannic. There aren't a lot of videos or photos of the Titanic. The pictures you see in the magazines or history books or videos are not of the Titanic. They're all pictures of the Olympic. There's only one video of the Titanic when it was starting its first voyage from Southampton. The Titanic was the world's biggest ship in 1912. It was built in a dry dock in Belfast, and it took 3 years to complete it. This is the incident of 10th April 1912. RMS Titanic, world's largest and most luxurious ship in its time. It set out on its first voyage. It was traveling from Southampton, England, to New York. It was being commanded by the 62-year-old senior captain, Edward John Smith. There was a lot of excitement regarding this ship in the passengers, public, and the media. It was not only the world's largest ship, around 269 meters in length and more than 53 meters high. The luxury on this ship was awe-inspiring. In those times, it cost $7.5 million to build the ship, which, if you take inflation into account, is equal to $400 million today. The facilities and decorations inside the ship could even leave a 5-star hotel behind stained glass mirrors, ornate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath, a gym, a squash court, 4 restaurants, 2 barbershops, and a library as well. Moreover, the kind of safety features that were used to build the Titanic, this ship was believed to be unsinkable. It was a ship that could never sink. It was that safe. White Star Line was the name of the company that built this ship. The vice president of this company was so confident regarding that, he had come out in front of the public and said that this ship is unsinkable. The year is 1912, the date, the 11th of April, and the Titanic takes off on its first voyage from Southampton, England. Since it's a newer ship, it comes with a lot of safety features. Apart from everything else, the ship has 15 watertight compartments that can remotely be separated via an electronic door. The stability of the ship has been focused on to the extent that if out of 15 of these watertight compartments, if 4 were to end up flooded, the ship will not sink. According to the rules of that time, the Titanic is supposed to have 16 lifeboats, but the Titanic is equipped with 20 lifeboats. These are 4 lifeboats more than what the regulations recommend, but on the flip side, compared to the Titanic's carrying capacity for its passengers and crew, the lifeboats can only accommodate half of the ship's passengers and/or crew, and no more than that. Keep in mind that during the year 1912, a lot of Europeans were migrating to America, and the best channel for them was to reach the UK, by land, catch a ship there, to make their way towards New York. To capitalize on this, a lot of companies were coming up with new ships, fast ones to make as much revenue as they could. The Titanic was also one of those fast ships. In keeping with 1912, the Titanic was capable of running at 23 knots. All kinds of people were aboard, renowned industrialists and actors, as well as immigrants who were on their way to America. The trip is estimated to take around 7 days. The weather is cold, but not as cold compared to the last 30 to 40 years. Forecasts say there are little to no chances of the ship encountering rough seas throughout the trip, so the weather is all good. 2 days later, after setting out on its first voyage, on the 12th of April, 1912, Titanic began to get its first ice warnings. The Atlantic Ocean that Titanic was crossing in order to get to America was replete with ice. There were mountains of ice, icebergs, that were a danger to this ship. These warnings are not an unusual thing. The ships that sail the oceans often communicate through radio and signal the nearby ships about ice being present in their vicinity and seek caution in their path. After getting these warnings, Titanic changed its course twice to avoid danger, but it did not reduce its speed. It continued its journey towards its destination at a speed of 21.5 knots, which is equal to 40 kilometers per hour. 2 days later, on the 14th of April, 1912, there were 7 more ice warnings, but Captain Smith and his crew ignored these warnings. They did not slow the speed of Titanic. Keep in mind that radars didn't exist, then emails didn't exist either, and neither did Weatherfax facilities, so most of the warnings and sightings were available via radio. This is why every ship had its own radio operator. Various ships reported seeing ice or icebergs in the northern Atlantic. Let's take a brief time out from this because I want to tell you about icebergs. Icebergs break off from the northern or southern continental shelf. They break off whenever the weather gets a little warm, and after breaking off, what's so notable about them is that the part of the iceberg you see above water is just the tip. It's 7 to 8 times bigger underwater. So, even if you spot a small iceberg, rest assured that it will be much bigger underwater. This can damage a ship beyond repair. Slowly, the day draws to a close, the sun sets, and the temperature sinks. On the 14th of April, 1912, at 8:55 p.m., Captain Edward J. Smith visits the bridge one last time, exchanges pleasantries with the bridge officer, tracks the progress of the ship, and then retires to his bed. The notable thing about the night of the 14th of April was that the moon was not visible. Without the moon, there was no moonlight, and the visibility was low on this night. The North Atlantic Ocean is very calm, but note that calm weather is good weather, but sometimes calm weather isn't good weather. As I told you earlier, icebergs tend to be 7 to 8 times bigger underwater. There's another thing of note, and that is the fact that an iceberg under the surface of the water gets eroded by strong currents. Strong currents gradually eat away at the iceberg until it completely flips over. The bottom of the iceberg makes it to the surface, and the top ends up underwater. In layman terms, this is called a dark iceberg. When that flips over above water, it's near transparent, and a dark iceberg combined with a calm sea are actually worse for a ship. Back then, there was a crow's nest on the ship, a small platform at a height which could be called a lookout point. Someone is made to sit atop it so that they can keep watch on the track of the ship to look out for traffic or obstructions. Ships used to have crow's nests with 1 or 2 lookouts. 2 watchkeepers were stationed at the Titanic's crow's nest. The person sitting here has to face very low temperatures. The cold winds were blowing at a very fast pace. Moreover, it was nighttime. The cold winds make the eyes tear up, which makes it difficult to see. One of them was Fred Fleet. Fred Fleet happened to see something in close vicinity to the ship. a black mass of sorts silhouetted against the stars. When the ship inched closer, Fleet realized that it may be a dark iceberg. The waves were calm. There wasn't any crashing. He immediately warned the bridge, saying, "Iceberg, dead ahead," meaning right close to the ship. 000 degrees ahead, speaking relatively. The iceberg right ahead. The duty officer gave a hard-to-port order, but the ship was going at around 23 knots. Around 23 knots, it was a fast-moving ship. Iceberg, right ahead. When he took that hard-to-port action, the iceberg ended up on the ship's starboard side, but the distance was nearly 400 to 450 meters when the iceberg was spotted. For a ship this big, this distance is very small. Fred rang the bell thrice quickly so that the people below could be alerted, then picked up the phone and called the officers on the bridge. He screams that there was an iceberg in front of them and that the ship should be steered immediately. First Officer William heard this message and signaled the engine room that the ship should be steered in the left direction, but unfortunately, it was too late.